Welcome to Off Script with Dan Dwyer on Robin Hood Radio, featuring in-depth interviews with guests from the world of theater and allied arts. Underwriting support from Johnny Cake Books in Salisbury, Connecticut, whose collection of rare collectible and out-of-print books is housed in a 19th century cottage in one of the most old-fashioned small towns in New England. And now, here's the host of Off Script, Dan Dwyer.
Well, thank you, Marshall, and welcome to Off Script. So, the management of nonprofit theaters for regional theaters across the country is always a challenge, but even in the competitive off-Broadway market in New York, it's even more so. My guest today is part of the management of one of New York's most successful off-Broadway theater groups, the New Group. And with me today is the Director of Development, or formerly known on the website, I guess, as Development Director, correct myself, for the New Group, Jamie Lehrer. Jamie's been with the New Group since 2011, when she returned to the United States after raising a family in London, where she was head of development for Lyric Hammersmith, one of London's most successful off-West End independent theater companies. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi, Dan.
Yeah, how are you?
Just fine.
Good. So before we talk about the job of Director of Development, or Development Director, as I corrected myself, I say going to the webpage, for those that aren't familiar with how New York theater scene is structured, tell us a little bit about the New Group, because there's so many independent off-Broadway nonprofit theaters, Playwrights, Roundabout, Signature, Theater for a New Audience over in Brooklyn, Second Stage. How does New Group fit into that constellation, and what do they do that sets them apart from all these other groups?
Well, I think that the New Group, we're going to be, next season will be our 25th season. So back, 24 years ago, Scott Elliott just had this idea, like so many theater stories, I have friends, I'm in the theater, let's put on a show. And then his first production was so successful that it became formalized as a company, and it's always because it's artist-driven. So what sets us apart is that not just that it's artist-driven, but that the shows, the properties that the plays and musicals we do are relevant, are timely, and also that there's an emotional core to whatever it is that we're producing. All of those theater companies that you mentioned often have a very specific remit. If it's Playwrights, it's all about the plays. Signature, it's also all about playwrights. Theater for a New Audience is about reinterpreting classics. And I would say the New Group is a little bit of everything, but it's all the artists. So it's the actors, as well as the set designers, as well as the sound designer and the lighting, and, in addition to the playwright.
Right.
And the directors.
And from my amateur point of view, New Group also is, if I could say, is a little edgier than some of the kind of, I don't want to disparage any of the theater companies, but there's a lot of bourgeois stuff out there, and I don't think that's a way that you would describe New Group. So give us, by example, maybe the first play that really put New Group on the map, and then some of the things that are kind of edgy that New Group has been in the news for over the last couple of years.
Right. Well, I think that, Ecstasy was the first production. That was a Mike Lee production, a collaboration. I think it's about pushing boundaries of how you perceive things, or how one could perceive things. But here's the fact. You see something on a film, you see, naked bodies on film, you see things, issues that are dealt with on the screen, whatever it might be, and you might hide your eyes, but you're over it. Somebody sees something, the same thing on a stage, they're shocked, they're horrified, it's blasphemy, it's whatever it is. And I think that never being afraid to push somebody's perception of whatever it might be. And that might be a topic that's relevant. I'm thinking about, we work with the playwright Thomas Bradshaw. Thomas Bradshaw is very controversial for many reasons, because he really speaks from the id. So his characters have no filter, but what they're saying, there's no judgment made on what they're saying. And I think that sometimes audiences are uncomfortable with that. We want to be told, this is bad, so you must react this way. And working with a playwright like Thomas, it's left to you to just okay, here, you may be shocked by the words you're hearing, but it's no less shocking than what's in the news. It's just that it's dramatized and on stage. Wallace Shawn is another great example of an artist that Scott has worked with. I think we've done 5 of his productions. And the last one was Evening at the Talk House. And I would say that part of that production was also that you had an experience. So you walked into the theater and it was like walking into a club. But the club is deceptive because it's a private club in the near future where all sorts of horrible things are happening and people are being routinely killed. It's sort of a dystopian view that we put on. It opened the day of the inauguration of our current president. And, and that was, did we know that those things were happening when the season was planned? Well, no. That play had been produced in London by another theater company. We took the play, and the same set designer, but Scott directed it. So that's just an example. Or just in terms of timeliness, it wasn't particularly controversial, but The True, which was the first show of the season, which was about Peggy Noonan, a real-life person, a play by Char White, that really captured the emotion.
Grandmother of Senator Christian Gillibrand,
exactly,
who covers some of this listening audience. Yeah.
Yes, and and it was truly a magnificent play because it dealt with party politics. It dealt with human emotions. Superbly acted. Edie Falco in the lead with Michael McKean and Peter Scolari, at a time when the whole nation was talking about party politics as we head into the election.
Besides Scott Elliott's artistic direction being prescient, sometimes it's really got just spot-on timing, such as the case one you didn't mention was Jerry Springer.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And that's one that was a huge hit in London, 25 years ago. It was really shocking because of the depictions of really, really crass kind of, out-of-the-closet behavior that people subjected themselves to on Springer's show. But it took 25 years for an American company to bring it to New York, and that was New Group.
Yes. I mean, I think that's right.
Yeah.
You know, that there's that.
Yeah, but the season can also be versatile. You mentioned The True, which was the last show that the New Group did, but now you've got something coming up, which is basically a musical version of a teen cult hit, movie cult hit. So tell us what it is and how that fits in.
What it is. So Clueless the musical. Well, Amy Heckerling, who wrote and directed the movie Clueless, was a good friend of Wallace Shawn's. Wallace Shawn, as I say, is a good friend of the New Group. He introduced Scott and Amy. And what Amy has done is she's written this musical, but the musical is actually her own lyrics on top of 90s songs. And it's I think in many ways, because we just started previews this week actually, and it's just joyous, but it's very young. It's got a lot of heart, but it's also pointing back to an innocent time where what happened to those days? What happened when the social commentary was so easy? So passing that's not prevalent. That's not happening now.
No.
So but also the star of it is this incredibly talented young actor named Dove Cameron. And she has, for example, 22 million Instagram followers. So the audience who will be coming to this show will not only be people who may know and love the movie, not only people who are just interested in what the New Group is doing, but all these really young people. So it's actually a wonderful entry point because we're always looking for entry points for new audiences to see theater, to see live theater, because it's so easy to stay at home now. You can stay on your screen, on your lap, or if you still have a television set, you're looking at something else. Why would you want to leave your home and go out and experience something live? Well, someone like Dove Cameron would bring somebody in.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to go see it Tuesday night.
Oh, great.
In case you're just joining us, the program is Off Script. I'm your host, Dan Dwyer, and my guest today is Jamie Lehrer. Jamie's the development director for the New Group, one of the most successful off-Broadway nonprofit theaters in New York. Okay, so we've talked about the New Group. Now let's talk about Jamie and development director. Being a director of development is more than fundraising.
That's right.
Give us an idea about what your typical day's like. If there is a typical day in a theater, I'm not sure.
I think that's one of the things I love about theater. I mean, my entry into doing this role was back in London, and our local theater, the Lehrer Hammersmith, had we used to go there all the time and just got to know some of the people who work there, and I was invited to join the development committee, which I didn't know at the time meant fundraising. So I said, I'd love to. Of course, I don't fundraise. And they said, oh, that's fine. You can just be a great ambassador. Well, I got there, and I thought, this is interesting. Maybe I could volunteer. And the first thing that happened, there was a benefit gala night for their Christmas panto show. And I thought, well, this is kind of fun. And then from going to being an intern there, I got the entry-level position, and then until I became head of development. And along the way, what I realized is that development in terms of fundraising is actually very creative because it's changing all the time. You are writing a grant proposal for a play, but it's a different play or it's a different musical. You're creating an event. It might be a gala. It might be a benefit performance. It might be a reading of a play that you just do a one night with celebrity actors reading, fundraising against that. It might be government. It might be going and going to a seminar about funding that's being released on a specific problem or a specific area for the arts. It might have to do with the education program, where we have this robust education program that offers free after-school classes for public high school students in New York City. Well, they also do performance. It's so exhilarating, all the different facets of how a theater company runs. We have a musical and play development. So there might be an in-house reading, or there might be a week-long reading festival. All of those things require money that a ticket just doesn't cover.
Right.
So, in an ideal world, you'd be, wanting to have, 40-60 in nonprofits, 60 being what you raise, your contributed revenue, as opposed to your earned revenue, which is ticket sales. Because what is crucial about off-Broadway is that you should not have to have the pressure that Broadway does. Broadway budgets are so high. They're crazy. Staggering because there's so many different elements to it. So they have to be looking how to raise a profit. You want to be healthy financially, any off-Broadway does, but the actors, the artists, they don't need that kind of pressure. And we want to do more than just put on shows. That's why I say the education or the play development. So I don't know if that...
Yeah, but hanging on your experience with Lehrer Hammersmith in London, there's a major difference between how the English finance and get theater done and how Americans finance and get theater done. So just talk about that a little bit.
Major, in one word, government funding.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. And certainly when I was there, the local, London is sort of broken up into boroughs, and Lehrer Hammersmith is in the borough of Hammersmith and Fulham. Well, the initiatives that they supported for the work that the Lyric did were staggering. The local NHS Authority, National Health Service Authority, we had Spring Awakening there, and they funded an entire performance, 2 performances, so that every 15-year-old in the borough could go to learn, and it was around sex education. So,
but it's not just CLIC. I mean, London. It's not just council funding or local funding. It's
and
also
the Arts Council,
it's national.
Arts Council England, or Arts Council Scotland, or Arts Council Wales. But yes, I mean, absolutely, it's a recognition that the arts add value to every person's life, and if you start with, like many initiatives, even in this country, with young people, then you've given another opportunity to enrich their lives in all of our lives in different ways. So subsidized tickets is always a key thing. At the new group, we have a free student matinee for at least one show of every performance for public school students. I think that the other difference is because the U.S. traditionally has not had the government funding, individuals have always understood the value of the arts. So that's where you get into private and individual income, which just doesn't exist on the same level in the UK. It's growing.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, because we've known each other for a while, and I think you mentioned to me that as an American, you introduced a really novel technique into development into the English theater scene at the Lyric.
Well,
it
wasn't just me. I mean, I have to give props off to a friend of mine, Lady Ruddick, Lady Jill Shaw Ruddick, who was on the board of the Donmar Warehouse, and she had an event. This was before I was at the Lyric, where she invited all her friends to come. She's an American, and it was kind of eye-opening because her idea was to give an experience, and everybody had a wonderful experience. So when I started to do it professionally, I thought, well, that's what's, if you can't tell someone, oh, this is valuable because it's there, but you can put something in the middle of the table and show how much fun it is, and most people will want to take part in it if they have any interest. And then understanding that actually, well, to take part, it's not just a free ride. There is a cost to it. And if I really want to do it, I will also contribute financially to that organization or for that one-off experience. But for me, development, and this is why I enjoy my job, isn't really just about sitting across and saying, Dan, can you give me money? There is an element of that, but it's really about presenting the opportunities for people to participate financially, but otherwise as well, because giving, as we all know, if you've ever given to anything, you get something from it yourself.
So how did you jumpstart individual giving, which wasn't the practice at the Lyric?
I started with the core people that we already had. And part of that core was this development committee that I had started off on.
Right.
Those people were the backbone of all of the initiatives that I did. They were so encouraging, and also encouraged because I saw what would happen. You know, gala events, things that are really part of what we do in the U.S. to raise money all the time for all kinds of charities, don't happen that frequently in the UK. And you can burn out. So rarely anyone has one every year. It might be every other year because people aren't used to it. But you set up a patron scheme, you set up a friend scheme, you invite people in for special things, and you learn to know who people are. It's all about people. Even foundations, there's somebody who's reading your application, who's, you know, if it's info at, somebody is looking at that. It's a real person. And if you have a natural rapport with people, it makes the job on all those fronts, on the foundation, government, individual giving, obviously, and the benefit, because you're always asking people to do things for you. You know, even the artists are so supportive of what we do at the new group. They'll do any, you know, a set visit. If they have a day job somewhere else that's on a TV show, they'll, you know, offer to have a set visit to that show. And then we can auction it off and raise sometimes thousands of dollars on that.
If you're just tuning in, my guest is Jamie Lehrer. She's Director of Development, or rather Development Director at the New Group, one of New York's most successful off-Broadway nonprofit theaters. Let's talk about the demographic as it relates to how New Group gets funded. Without getting into the specifics of the New Group budget, you made a reference to some figure before. The 60-40 ratio is 60% contributed and 40% ticket sales. Okay. So does this 40% ticket sales include annual subscriptions?
Yes, it would.
Okay, so here's the thing. Everyone's chasing down subscriptions, right? You get a call from Lincoln Center. You get a call from Manhattan Theater Club. You get a call from the New Group. And I think subscriptions can be kind of fickle, because I've been member of theater groups before, and if they've had a really lousy season, I just say, well, I'm not going to go back next year. So how do you maintain your subscription base, or ideally, you really want to expand it?
I think that, well, subscriptions do fall under marketing in our organization. And what I would say is that about 10 years ago, the trend was, or maybe not quite, maybe 8 years ago, the trend was across the industry that subscription sales were going down because people didn't want to be locked into one theater. They wanted to pick and choose.
Right.
But as ticket prices go up, the subscription model is very appealing because you're paying a fraction of that ticket price through your subscription than you would if you were just to buy it off the internet, one off. And then you're looking and you're going, well, actually, I could see 4 shows if I'm a subscriber to the new group. And I love Edie Falco. Oh, how wonderful. That's worth the price of that. But actually, oh, what fun. There's a Jesse Eisenberg play. Oh my gosh, Alan Cumming's also going to be in this. Oh, Clueless the musical. And so it becomes whether, you have this bouquet of flowers and you want all of the flowers or you really just want the roses. And
what about the fear factor? I mean, the other thing that I think is operative from my armchair point of view is that people fear that without a subscription, they won't be able to get a seat in a show that's sold out because theaters like the New Group have a very limited amount of seating.
Absolutely. When you have a 190, anywhere between 183 and 199 seats, and you have a sold-out show, it's really hard. And we've had to close subscriptions for this season because the True was selling out immediately, and so we had to close out. We still have patrons available, and there's still some seats that come up. Same with Clueless. It's almost completely sold out. So but you can't predict that.
Right.
Subscriptions go on sale when the season is announced. So if when the season announcement says Edie Falco and Alan Cumming are in it, and Clueless the musical, all of a sudden you might get really excited. Oh, Jesse Eisenberg. I remember he did that play, The Spoils. I really loved that when it was on, at the New Group a few seasons ago. So I'll take a risk.
What about the demographic? I think that, probably the uninformed impression is that the typical subscriber is probably someone who's older, perhaps even retired. How do you want to lower your demographic, to bring younger people into the subscription base, or is that a different premise than getting young people to come and buy tickets show by show? So
I think that I couldn't really speak overall to our demographic for subscribers, for example, but what I can say is that the New Group is always looking for new audiences, and that by that it's a new entry point in. So it might be that it's a subsidized, like I said, we have a free student matinee, so all of those students are going to see that show for free. Maybe the next time they have an opportunity to see something, they'll be able to go get a Rush student ticket, which at different theaters is a different price, but that actually is an entry point in. We have all sorts of discounts that are available through different resources. We have other programs. So we have something called New Group Now, which takes an issue that might be in the production, and then we take it's sort of where art and issues meet, because then the panelists will be talking about the issue that will be discussed. And those are really important new entry points because you bring new audiences all the time. It's not just to see the shows, it's also to engage with the other things that we're doing. But I think that, price is usually the barrier to people going to the theater overall. It's expensive in general.
What's the pricing policy at New Group, and are there special student rates?
There are. I'm just trying to think right now what the rates are. But
the question also, let's get back to the core fundraising, because you really detailed marvelously how broad your role as director of development is. But getting back to fundraising in the Trump era, for all of that is, and we don't have to get into that, is it harder to raise money for the arts or easier?
Let me just say right now, it doesn't matter who is in office, it's never easy to raise money.
Right.
So that's just hands down rule of thumb. And anybody who says it is easy, I would really question how that is, because I'd like to know the secret.
You want to know the trick.
Please tell me the trick.
Right.
I think that people are definitely aware of the arts, but the arts aren't at the forefront of our politics every day. You know, the value that is arts is a cumulative effect, I think, and it's across it's museums, it's music.
Oh, it's a competitive environment for everything, yeah.
And I think that, you know, it would be individuals and foundations who have always supported those things, will always support those things. But new foundations are also looking bigger, wider, deeper, you know, at other issues. As I say, one of those issues might be the entry point into the arts. So a foundation might, you know, step up their funding for student tickets to cover, you know, free student matinees and things like that.
We talked about the season thus far, The True, which was fabulous, Clueless, which is on now and I guess continuing through the first of the year. Briefly, we've got a couple of minutes left. Tell us, what other two productions can we look forward to in the spring 2019?
Well, Daddy by Jeremy O. Harris with Alan Cumming is the next play. It's really exciting. Jeremy's an exciting new voice. It's really incredible and going to be fantastic.
And after that?
And after that is Jesse Eisenberg's Yay Sister, that Scott Elliott, our founding artistic director, will be directing. All the details for that are TBD, but Jesse is an amazing playwright and wrote The Spoils, which we produced, and also went on to London, that production, a couple of years ago.
Jamie, thank you very much for being here.
A pleasure, Dan.
And thank you everybody for listening. The program's been Off Script. I'm your host, Dan Dwyer. The guest has been Jamie Lehrer, Director of Development at the new group, which is now featuring the musical version of the teen cult movie hit Clueless. Thanks for joining us. Until the next time you listen in, as a dear departed friend of mine used to say, be well.
Underwriting support for Off Script with Dan Dwyer from Johnny Cake Books in Salisbury, Connecticut, whose collection of rare, collectible, and out-of-print books is housed in a 19th century cottage in one of the most old-fashioned small towns in New England. Off Script with Dan Dwyer is also available via podcast on our on-demand page, robinhoodradio.com. Click on On Demand, and then click on Off Script with Dan Dwyer.